Your great-grandmother did not take fish oil capsules. She did not track macros, buy supplements labeled anti-inflammatory, or schedule appointments with a functional medicine doctor. She almost certainly never heard the word cytokine. She also, statistically, did not have rheumatoid arthritis at 45. She did not have chronic joint pain in her 50s. She was not inflamed. Chronic inflammatory disease in the United States has climbed steadily since the mid-20th century. Conditions that were rare in 1920 are now described as normal features of aging. They are not normal, they are new. This video covers 5 structural reasons her diet did not produce chronic inflammation. 4 of them get discussed regularly. The 5th is something most people eat maybe once a decade, and it was on her table every week. That one comes last. Before industrial agriculture, the fat composition of American food was structurally different from what it is today. Meat came from animals that grazed on grass. Eggs came from chickens that ate insects and forage. The ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids in the food supply hovered somewhere between 1:1 and 4:1, depending on the region and the season. The current American dietary ratio sits between 15:1 and 20:1, weighted heavily toward omega-6. Omega-6 fatty acids, found in abundance in vegetable oils, grain-fed meat, and virtually all processed food, are metabolic precursors to pro-inflammatory compounds called prostaglandins and leukotrienes. Omega-3 fatty acids work in the opposite direction, producing compounds that resolve inflammation. A 2002 review in Biomedical Pharmacotherapy identified this ratio imbalance as a contributing driver of cardiovascular disease, cancer, and inflammatory and autoimmune conditions. This is not a deficiency in the traditional sense. It is a ratio problem, one system pushed out of balance by a single generation of industrial food production. The human body has had roughly 60 years to adapt to this shift. It has not adapted. The inflammation is the signal. That ratio imbalance does much of its damage through the gut, which brings us to what your great-grandmother kept on the counter next to the stove. Before refrigeration, fermentation was not a wellness practice. It was food preservation. American households before 1940 produced sauerkraut, cucumber pickles, cultured butter, and kefir-style drinks as a routine part of managing food through winter. Lactobacillus bacteria, the organisms responsible for those cultures, were a daily presence in the gut, not by design, but by necessity. The gut microbiome produces short-chain fatty acids when it ferments dietary fiber. Butyrate, one of those short-chain fatty acids, is the primary fuel source for colonocytes, the cells lining the gut wall, and directly suppresses the NF-κB signaling pathway, which functions as one of the body's central switches for inflammatory response. A 2021 Stanford study published in Cell found that a high-fermented food diet increased microbiome diversity and reduced circulating markers of inflammation, including interleukin-6, across a 10-week period. A disrupted gut barrier allows bacterial fragments into the bloodstream. The immune system classifies them as threats. The resulting low-grade systemic inflammation is now associated with depression, metabolic syndrome, and a range of autoimmune conditions. Your great-grandmother was not managing her gut health. She was accidentally preserving it through a food system that had no other choice. The fermented foods were one part of the pattern. What she cooked them in, and what she cooked everything else in, is where most people do not expect to find the answer. Between 1960 and 1980, vegetable oils displaced lard, tallow, and butter as the dominant cooking fat in American homes. Dietary guidelines drove the shift. Saturated fat was classified as the primary cardiovascular risk factor, and the food industry had cheaper alternatives ready. Crisco replaced lard. the transition was framed as progress. Vegetable oils, soybean, corn, sunflower, safflower, are high in linoleic acid, an omega-6 polyunsaturated fat. Under heat, linoleic acid oxidizes and produces aldehydes, including 4-hydroxynonenal, which are cytotoxic and measurably pro-inflammatory at the cellular level. Lard and tallow, by contrast, are predominantly saturated and monounsaturated fat, chemically stable under cooking temperatures. A 2015 randomized controlled trial published in the BMJ found that replacing saturated fat with linoleic acid-rich vegetable oils increased cardiovascular mortality, not reduced it. The fat your great-grandmother cooked with was not contributing to her inflammatory load. The fat that replaced it, heated daily across decades of meals, demonstrably does. That is not a fringe position. It is now in the peer-reviewed record. If this history around dietary fat and what replaced it is new to you, there is a lot more of it on this channel. Worth exploring after this one. The cooking fat was one structural piece. The plants she ate, and the sheer number of different ones, was another. A rural American household in 1900 might have grown or foraged 30 to 40 distinct plant species across a single season. Dandelion greens and nettles in spring, wild berries, sorrel, and cucumbers through summer, root vegetables, squash, and dried legumes through the cold months. The variety was not the result of nutritional awareness. It was a consequence of living seasonally and locally, without a grocery system that could deliver the same 12 items year-round. Dietary fiber diversity drives microbiome diversity. Different plant species carry different polyphenols, prebiotic compounds, and fermentable fiber fractions, each one feeding a distinct population of gut bacteria. Research from the American Gut Project, one of the largest citizen science studies of the human microbiome, found that people who consumed more than 30 different plant types per week had significantly greater microbiome diversity than those eating fewer than 10. Microbiome diversity correlates consistently with reduced inflammatory markers across multiple independent studies. Modern Western diets are built on a narrow base. Wheat, corn, soy, and a small number of additional commodity crops account for the bulk of caloric intake across the entire food system. The microbiome reflects that narrowness. That narrowing shows up in the inflammatory data. The fifth item on this list is the one that most directly corrected for it, and it is the one almost no one has eaten in the last 30 years. Until the mid-20th century, Americans ate organ meats as a regular part of the weekly diet. Liver on Tuesdays, kidney stew, heart slow roasted with root vegetables. These were not delicacies. They were the affordable cuts, and they were eaten because nothing was wasted. Liver consumption in the United States peaked around the 1950s and has declined by more than 90% since. It left the table so completely that most people under 60 have never cooked it. Beef liver is one of the only single foods that delivers meaningful concentrations of vitamins A, D, K2, B12, folate, and copper in a single serving. Retinol, the active, preformed form of vitamin A, directly regulates immune cell differentiation and suppresses inflammatory cytokine production at the gene expression level. Copper deficiency is independently associated with elevated inflammatory markers and impaired antioxidant defense. These are not marginal associations. They are documented at the mechanistic level across multiple research groups. Your great-grandmother was not taking a curcumin capsule or a high-dose fish oil supplement. She was eating liver once a week. The fat-soluble vitamins she obtained from it were doing precisely what the modern supplement industry now markets products to do, at bioavailability levels that no capsule formulation has replicated. That is the ancestral answer to inflammation, not a product. a pattern that delivered the raw materials the immune system needed to regulate itself. The ratio, the ferment, the fat, the diversity, the organ. 5 practices that were not health interventions. They were just how people ate before the food system industrialized in a single generation. Each one was displaced gradually, replaced by a cheaper input, a more convenient product, or a guideline that has since been revised. Chronic inflammation is the downstream result of all 5 disappearing at once, within the same decades, across the same population. Your great-grandmother was not healthier because she was more disciplined. She was healthier because her food environment had not yet been rearranged. That is the uncomfortable part of this story. The problem is not personal failure. It is a structural shift that happened faster than the human body could follow. The fix is not buying an anti-inflammatory supplement. It is rebuilding the pattern, starting with whichever of these 5 is most absent from your diet right now. The next video on this channel goes deep on one of the most powerful things your great-grandmother made weekly that almost nobody makes anymore. That one is worth watching next. Did you grow up in a house that still ate liver? And if not, is that the one you would actually bring back? Or does that feel like a bridge too far? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone.